Instagram at Gino the Barber 813. Today I have my client John actually showed up today for this cut. So what we'll be doing today is actually just a nice little kind of a mix between a mullet burst fade into like a little bit of like a mohawk with some nice texture, something that can definitely be transitioned from either male or female customer. So today, excuse me, I'm trying to remember some of y'all the terms that between Salon innovations and great clips that you guys use all the time, especially your 5 steps to deliver great, and compare them to how we do everything within a barbershop as well. So that getting going. If there's any questions or things like that, just go ahead and type them in on the chat, and then they're going to be delivering those to me as well. So as we're going, so if you want to know a little behind the scenes with myself, I'm 22 years in the industry, 20 years actually licensed, and 15 years as a shop owner as well. This is my finishing up my 7th year as as a member for the BabylissPRO Barber team. And like I said, we are in my shop. This is completely live. The shop is open. We're open 9 to 6 today. So if you hear a little air hose or something like that, that's completely fine. We do use air hoses to blow off all of our client the hair and stuff like that, rather than using a blow dryer. So if you hear that, you know what's going on. But so getting going started today, we're going to be doing the burst. We always like to start off with using a trimmer and being able to get the bald line. Your trimmer is going to be the closest thing to your razor blade besides using a shaver. Okay, so as we get started, I use the corner of my T-blade and just take that one little corner and work my way up and around. Fold the ear down. Now, if your client has a piercing on the top, like some like men and women both have, if your customer has that, well, you can actually fold this down. Some guys have that little fold over in the ear we call cauliflower ear. If they're an MMA fighter, we can just grab the top and we can actually lift that up. And you see how much that actually doubles up that surface area. This way you avoid any pain to your customer. Now we can get all the way back and around, again, using the corner or folding that skin down. I'm actually going to take this pretty close up towards the front because with John, we usually do this totally solid. So it's all skin right here. So we don't see a C cup. Today, I'm going to leave that. So you have a little bit of that C cup as well. And then we can blend that in nice and easy. So we're going to exaggerate this burst today. Okay. Now this is how I start off all of my sections. And I go skin when I'm doing a skin fade. And again, if it's anything with a 1 to a 3 or to a 4, you can stagger these steps any which way that makes it easier for you. So for skin, I like to go skin with the trimmer. I go half, and that's going to be without any type of attachment on it, no blade, totally open. That's going to be your true 000. Again, not that big of a step, but just enough with a nice little flick. So it's okay to dig into that hair up in the side, going up above the parietal ridge. And then I jump right into a 1.5 to a 1.5 attachment. Okay, if you can see that on there. You might be asking why I don't do a 2. And a 2 is just one extra step that you have to try to blend out. And a lot of times when you're trying to make sure that your fade stays in a particular area, it's a little easier just going with that difference of 1/16 of an inch from the 1.5 to the 2. And that's really all that it is. A lot of times we're dealing with guards. They're 3rd grade fractions is how I like to say them in my classes. So everything's still out of 8 guards, even though they don't give you a 7 and an 8 any longer. It's everything's from a half and a 1.5, and then the 1 through the 6. So those 8 guards, everything is still out of 8. So 4 is half of 8, so it becomes a half an inch. 2 is a quarter of 8, it's 2/8, so it becomes simplified as 1/4. 1 is 1 out of the 8, so it's 1/8 of an inch. Hair still grows in half an inch a week. Half an inch a month, so it's 1/8 of an inch a week. So your client, if he comes in and he gets a number 1 today and doesn't come in for another month, 1 plus the 4 weeks would be a 5. He can then tell you, hey, I liked it 1 week old. And you could say, it's fine. I used a 1 on you last time. My next card would be a 2. So it's very simple. So again, that 1/16 of an inch is not going to make much of a difference to me to be able to see whether or not it's a 1.5 or a 2 once I do my blending, whether I'm using any texture shears or clipper over comb, which clipper over comb is my bread and butter technique. That's something I absolutely love. Okay.
So
But
Gino,
again,
a question for you. Do you use the lever at all just to
Oh,
do any?
absolutely. Absolutely. I use the lever all the time. This is just for my sectioning right now. So you always want your sections to be at the shortest length possible when using that taper, when using your guard. Just to set everything else up. And then I will be going through all my sections then to blend everything else out. So absolutely. That's a great question, whoever asked it. But yes, I will definitely be using that. Okay. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna go grab my shaver out of my drawer. Okay, so now when I want to use, I would like to use a shaver before I do anything else. Before I start any of my fading, I like to be able to use the full shaver, and I want to be able to get that as bald as possible. Okay, so I go in with just a one foil, and I will blend out as we shave as far down as possible, and I bring that right up to that line of demarcation that I created with my trimmer. My next step after that is I'm actually going to take the same exact tool that I used to put this line in. I'm going to use the same tool to be able to take that out.
So, Gino, we have a question.
Yes.
The question is, there are cosmetologists out there that think that they are not allowed to use the shaver. Can you speak to a little bit about that? Because it actually, isn't it more of a finisher and not like a straight edged razor?
Yeah, absolutely. It really is for finishing. So it's all a personal preference as well to either you or for your client for the look that either for sorry, customer. I have to get used to saying customer rather than client. We say client in the barbershop, so I apologize. But for your customer, it's either personal preference for them for what the look that they're going for, because remember they have to wear it, or it's a personal preference for us. And it's just the look that we would like to give to our customers and to see them walk out with. So again, it's that professional or personal, reference. But it does also replace the straight razor when, of course, when a cosmetologist is not allowed to use any type of a straight razor except for like a feather, nape razor with the pro guards and stuff like that on them. So, but it does actually, it's both. So you can either use it as that finisher just to give that nice final touch and a nice smoothness to your haircut, or you can also use it to replace the actual straight razor because the trimmer can only go down so far even with doing any type of zero gapping, which anyone that I met in Minnesota when we were talking about how to zero gap the trimmer, which is just really simply you're taking, you're taking your cutting blade on the trimmer and you're actually moving it up to where it's closest to your top blade. Okay. So you get giving yourself up to zero gap in between the two blades, and that's going to give you the closest thing to your razor like effect. So, but that shaver is just going to get that next step down. It's not necessary, but again, it's just something that's a personal preference for yourself. But personally, I love to use it. I love to use it, especially if he can actually take a straight razor or take a shaver, and he's not going to bump up from it. Okay, a lot of my clients, African American and things like that, a lot of those customers, they're not able to use a razor, so I use a sharper zero gap trimmer to get that closest cut for them. So once I get done actually using the shaver, I go back in with the same trimmer. I don't put any hard lines. I do it all soft, meaning is I want to be able to see the cutting blade itself. So if I put in a hard line, it's this way. I see the top of the blade. Soft line, you're flipping it over. No different than when you're fading. You're softening out any of your lines by fading this way. You're going to be putting in hard lines and raking this way, and it's going to be much harder to be able to take that out. So by this, I'm just using the corner teeth and just barely clipping that line of demarcation, I'll be able to hear a crunch. So I know that I'm in that line, even if even if his hair is pretty light in terms of shade, I can still be able to see it. What this does for me is it saves me a tremendous amount of time at the end of the haircut. Because at the end of the haircut, if I don't do that and I fade everything else out nicely, and then I use the shaver, then I have to try to take out that line. What could end up happening is that low fade could turn into a mid fade. That mid fade could end up turning into a high fade, and the high fade is going to turn into a free haircut. So let's just be honest. So it's not something that you really want to do. You don't want to spend all that time. And y'all typical time, you usually having your customers done within 12 to 16 minutes. This is going to keep you on that 12 to 14 minute time. by doing that step. If you don't do that step, you're going to be teetering in at 15, 16, possibly in that 17-minute time, and then you're going to be pushing off, and you're not going to be in your cuts per hour ratio that you're looking for. So that's something that it just really is super, super helpful. Okay, so now the question that Sharon that you asked me earlier about using my steps. Now this is where I start everything off. Now there's other brands that don't use the locking detent like what we use, so they use a free flowing taper lever. So with that being said, that's perfectly fine. So you know exactly where your clipper is going to be closed, and you know where the blade is at when it's all the way open, but you have to be able to find a midpoint of that blade to be able to take out from 0 to your half. Okay, so we have 5 locks, so I use the third. I go from closed with the first to the third notch in the middle, and I go all the way open. And that is something that I can do without actually having to be able to look at my clipper. So I can just turn, if I know I'm open, I'm sorry, if I'm all the way closed, so it's in the shortest length, I can just go down 2 notches and I can count it, and I can feel it in the tip of my finger. If I'm all the way open, I can push it up 2, and I really don't have to look at the clipper to be able to see whether or not I'm in that midpoint. So I always start off everything closed. Again, they're very, very short little strokes. You're not getting crazy excited and putting these huge lines in there. And I'm just using the corner of the teeth. So that's all we closed. Now I move off to my midpoint, take the next line. And as soon as we're clipping this away or just moving, the blade's moving side to side. So I'm moving side to side. And now I'm already back up into that half section. I'm going to go back all the way open, back in that half section. And I want to make sure that I got all the hairs and I didn't leave any stones unturned. Okay, now we do have a half guard, but I don't use the half guard just yet. I go directly to my number 1. Your half guard just a smoothing guard. It's a blending comb. That's really all that it is. I jump right to my number 1 and I do the same thing. Now, if you hear a little bit of a rattle of the blade, all that is because my clipper is 0 gap. Okay, so there's really not a whole lot of room in between the teeth and the actual plastic of the guard itself. So because of that, you hear a little bit of a rattle. It's not pulling his hair or doing anything else like that. It's just the friction that it's causing. That's all. That's all that sound is. Other than that, there's nothing wrong with your tool. If that happens to you, it's more than likely it's just a little bit of that friction. So going through my whole sections, I did the same thing, close, mid, and open, and that's exactly what I do. Now I'm back up into this area where the 1.5 was at. I jump right back to my 1.5. Again, make sure everything is done. Now I will go ahead and I'll take this up a little further now. So here's the 1.5 close. Here's 1.5 mid. Doesn't seem like I'm really taking off much. But again, it's just you're just making short little steps. Just slow and steady wins the race. And this is all the way open. Next thing after that, now I go right in with the half attachment. In this section right here, now I can just come in and just lighten up that flow just a little. So in my shop, I'm doing 30-minute haircut, but in that counts as that's your client consultation. That's the physical haircut itself. Since I am a barber, I'm able to use a straight razor. And then afterwards, if there's anything else that they need to have done, you can look at they can look in the mirror or anything, all that accounts in it. If they're a few minutes late or if the guy has to get up and use the restroom, I have plenty of time to be able to do it. So I'm still doing my own delivering of great because I'm still going to be greeting and introducing myself if it's a new client. Okay. So I'm going to be welcoming them into my shop, thanking them for coming in. I'm going to be asking them how they found me. I'm also going to be asking them what are their expectations? Okay, what made them choose me? Why did they choose to come from another barbershop or another establishment? What is it that I can do for them that the other barber did not do? Okay, so those are those things that I'm going to be asking them. I'm going to be trying to figure out what kind of haircut because half the battle is making sure that they have to understand what they're asking. Okay, you have to be an educator behind the chair. Everyone behind the chair technically is an educator. You don't have to be on stage like what I do to become an educator because your client half the time is they may not be able to translate what they want to you. They saw a picture and they don't know the terms. So Layman's terms is perfectly fine. Helping them to make sure that they understand what they are actually asking themselves and then making them feel comfortable that you understand exactly what they're asking, even if they didn't ask it right. Okay. So it's those things back and forth. So we ask all those questions and we go and to make sure that we're completely to their satisfaction. And then, of course, once all haircut's done and we're having our conversation with them and seeing how their day is going, you start remembering little facts about them. So now I understand that you guys have your Great Clip said they have your call them your clip notes and things like that. I do online booking as well. And I have my own, just like y'all have, where they can do the online check-in. There's the little notes that are on there for you. Well, I have my own notes on my website that I can go in. And for John, I can go and I can put, hey, his skin might be sensitive around the back half of his beard. So I know which trimmers not to use on him and things like that. So I can put those things on it and it'll flag me when I'm on my website and I can actually see those things. So it's a constant reminder. And of course, you thank them that they come back, and if they haven't had your card, you give them the card, give them the website, show them how to book, and show them how to do those, walk them through those steps, and then help them out from that point on. And it just becomes now your customer ends up turning into a little bit more of a relationship as well as a friendship as well with them because now they trust you. So now they can sit down in the chair. You thank them again for coming in, and you can say, hey, same thing. And they can say yes or no, and it makes things so much easier and wonderful. Okay. Now, from here, since I already have my half attachment on, let's just go ahead and lighten up a little bit of the beard. I'm having this all the way closed. Now, remember, a beard technically starts at the bottom of the ear down. From the bottom of the ear up is just sideburn. So if your client doesn't want their beard done, it's fine. You still need to blend down some of that beard. So I like going in a little bit against the grain. Then I like to flip the clipper over and go down with the grain. And I do what I call a reverse C scoop. You all know a C scoop is coming up and giving that nice softening effect. Instead, I come down and I bring it back towards me. Basically just feathering and just raking at the hair. And by doing that, it softens up this area here of the beard without actually cutting in. Because if I were to try to cut into it, it's going to leave a hard line and then it's going to pop out. By this, it's giving me a nice soft effect. Now I can come in all the way without a guard, open, and kind of do what we call corner blending. So you're taking your clipper rather than being at 0 degree, I'm turning it to about 45 to 50 degrees and turning it and just using those corner teeth and just lightening up those hairs there. So on the video, you may not be able to see the hairs too much, but up close, I can still see some nice stubble. So when I do use my trimmer or my razor, that'll be nice and popped out, and then it'll still blend outwards and inwards in both. So now my next step is clipper over comb, completely no guard or no comb attachment on there. If you want to use a comb attachment, perfectly fine. It's going to add a little bit of texture, and it'll be kind of like using some pair of texture shears, but being able to do more with bulk. So my easy technique in terms of using clipper over comb is you just scoop up the hair, okay? Because a lot of times the finish that's on here, and if the teeth are, I like using teeth that are nice and tight like this and nice and pointy. And so this way, and you see how there's a good separation between the teeth. It's not too wide. It's also not too close together. So this is going to help the hair to still flow in. But what it also does is sometimes they're a little more rounded and there's a little too much like finish that's on these combs. So a lot of times it just wants to push the hair down rather than combing it up. So I like to be able to take it, scoop up the hair, bring it up. Now I ride the spine of the comb onto the scalp rather than the teeth being on. And I can just come in and just cut. So I just do this, I cut, and I go through my same motion. I scoop and cut, I scoop and cut. And as I'm doing this, I'm actually pulling the hair away. Because if I grab a pair of my shears, if I come in with a pair of shears and I lift up, what am I doing? I'm pulling the hair up and away from the actual scalp itself. So this is the same exact thing here. I'm actually lifting up the comb and I'm actually pulling it up and away. You know, your attachment's doing the same thing as your comb is doing. That's why they're called comb attachments. If you're not already aware that are inside of these attachments here, this is going to do the same things for me as the comb is that's in my hand. This is actually scooping the hair up, and you can actually see the hair lifting through. There is a scoop that's on the inside that lifts the hair up. So this is the number two. So there's a scoop that's actually lifting up the hair a quarter of an inch from the scalp. And what this is doing is right where the teeth meet, it's lifting it up to a quarter of an inch to giving me that guaranteed cut to be in a quarter inch of hair that I'm going to be left with. Okay. So this is the same thing now. Instead, we're actually doing it a little bit faster and with a little bit more bulk action, and we're freehanding all the flow here.
So Gino, so basically what you're doing is no tension cutting, is that correct?
Absolutely.
All right. So I have a question from Emily Tarmel. Her name is Emily Tarmel. She
Okay.
said, I would like to know why my Babyliss Pro gets loud when I hold it upright, even if I've just oiled it.
Okay. Great question, Emily. Thank you for that. A lot of times too, remember a lot of the clippers, especially if it's something like this, like our metal clippers, they're all metal bodies. The only piece of plastic that's in there is the little white piece that the cutting blade. I'm assuming you're talking about the clipper, not the trimmer. Um, it's just a little blade cushion. That's that little white piece that's the cutting blade is actually sitting on. That's the only plastic piece that's inside of that entire body. Now, the spinning part for the motor itself will actually end up burrowing out a little bit more space onto that onto that nook. Okay. So what that ends up doing is it causes a little bit more of noise. Now, imagine walking into a house that has all tile floors, there's no carpeting or anything, it's going to echo. Okay. So an all metal body housing is always going to be louder than something that's all plastic. Okay. But that could also mean a screw might be loose. Okay. So you have to check things like check the screw that's on your lever here. Make sure that's tight because this is putting a lot of tension and putting tightness onto this bracket here. That bracket is what's also holding your blade in tight, not just these screws. It's holding everything in nice and tight. And now, if a lot of times, if you have this on and I push down, you can hear where it changes. See how that pressure? A lot of times there's a little bit of a rattle. So if you tighten that, that'll help. But a lot of times we keep it a little bit loose because we don't want it to have it so tight that it strips the screw and then I can't move the lever. I like a little bit of tension, just like no different on your shears, that when you want to have your shears, you want to be able to pop it open and just drop it. And it doesn't need to smack back. You want it to actually have a little bit of drag on your shear. So this is the same thing. So make sure that these screws are tight and this screw is tight. Same thing now with your trimmer. Make sure these screws are tightened in and make sure these two screws are tightened in. Because if those are loose, the blade can slide out of place and that's going to end up causing that rattling sound. Now, and all the new tools that we send out, a new blade cushion comes for both the clipper and the trimmer. So you'll have a brand new white piece that's in plastic in your box whenever you get a new tool from us. So all you have to do is if that happens, you can take that apart, take the blade off, take the new one out, pop the new one, pop the old one off, pop the new one right back in, and you're good to go. And you just have to go and just readjust your tool. Just make sure that again, make sure maintenance is so important with the tools. Make sure that you're not just make sure that you're cleaning it properly. Make sure that when you are spraying any type of disinfectant on here, that you're actually turning this upside down. Okay. Because if you're not doing that, everything is actually going back up into the clipper rather than being able to drop down. Okay, so you have to really make sure that you're actually doing and cleaning everything properly. Now, you can also do a little secret of taking 91 or 99% alcohol and getting yourself a color bowl, putting about that much alcohol actually in there. You're going to want to be able to just to dip the clipper blade upside down, just enough for the alcohol to be able to cover the blade, turn it on, let it sit in there for about 15 to 20 seconds each, do all your tools. And what's going to happen is all the gunk and everything else like that, if there's any there's any gel or any other product or anything else, it might be locked up in there inside the blade because a lot of times when you take the blade off, there's a little bit of gunk because the oil, it's going to be sticking to the back of the tool. And make sure you don't over oil either. All those things together can actually mess up your blades. And that's just not coming for our blades. That's for any clipper, any trimmer from any of the brands whatsoever. Maintenance is the biggest thing because we pay a lot of money for these and you want to be able to let them work for the longest time. So as consumers, when we purchase a tool, we want to make sure that the value is going to of that tool is going to exceed the cost. Okay, so I'm going to repeat that again. You want to make sure that the value of that item is going to exceed the cost. So if this costs you $200 and it's going to be, say, a $30 haircut, it's going to take you six, seven haircuts without a tip to be able to replace the money that you just got done spending on this clipper. So you want to be able to make sure that you give it the TLC that's necessary and be able to maintenance it properly so you can use it for years on end and just be able to make money on it, hand over fist, really. And honestly,
Well,
with the
Emily says that that was very helpful. She says, oops, I didn't change out the white piece and I never turned it upside down either.
it happens, a lot of times, most of the time, come on, I'm at fault of it too. I order something new. I see all the little, I see the white little packaging in it. Half the time it's not in English. So I just toss it because I'm like, oh, I can find out the stuff online. I can Google it. I can YouTube it. But a lot of times with our tools now, we have so much information. There's QR codes that you can scan and it has everything on it. So just, we're all at fault of that. So that's an industry wide thing where we just don't end up looking at it because we're just kind of trained to the fact that it's more than likely just going to be something that's required for the companies to send in, and it's really not anything of knowledge. And we've actually changed that now, so now it has all that information in there. So we're just going to finish up going back in with the clip over comb. The other thing that you can also do a lot, and when we were at the event in Minnesota, I was cutting up one of the managers there, and I was doing a point cutting technique by just holding the clipper and the trimmer together. So if you're right-handed, you're going to want to hold it where you want to be able to see the logo of the company and be able to see the blade because I'm going to be cutting from right to left. So I want to be able to see it like this. Okay. So I call it like an okay methods because you're saying everything's okay. So I'm holding with the O, thumb and index finger. The meaty part of my thumb is actually going to be right up against the right up against the taper lever. And then what I just do is I flip my hand over so you can see the blade here. And what I do is I put the handle of the comb there next to the blade itself, and I will kind of grip it. So I'll kind of do like a little bit of a knuckleball action, a little bit if I play baseball, so I'll use a lot of baseball terms. So I'll hold it like this. Okay. So now this way, I can actually still turn on the clipper from here. And what I do now, this hand is, so make sure it doesn't hit the tripod. And what I can do is this hand's completely free. Now I'm able to comb the hair up and see a little bit of hair, and I can come right in and cut. This is great to be able to use it on dry hair or hair that already has a little bit of product in it. If if they don't get the hair wash first, and you're giving them a backhand clipper cutting technique, this is just like using a pair of shears without having to put your clippers down. So I still do use shears, but this helps with bulk. This helps to go through an area where I can also come in and point cut. Best part about point cutting with the clipper, I'm not gonna cut myself. I can actually go in and tap my hands and not worry about cutting myself. So I'll still use shears, but I like doing all the dry work first. And then I can go in after I'm already done with everything. And I can go back and I can wet his hair. But I'll already have edged them. I've already done the razor blade on them. Then I go back and wet the hair and put any product. And then I go in with shears and kind of fix whatever's necessary. But with John, we really don't do a whole lot of cutting. Today we probably will. Because how long has it been? How many weeks has it been since you came in? About 5 weeks. So yeah. So I called him while we were still in Minnesota, and he waded through two different hurricanes and the trip to Minnesota, found out what we needed, and came in today and just waited to come in today for this cut. So they kind of give you an idea how that ends up looking. So you still have that first look plus the mohawk, and then this way too, the hair that's here on the bottom part of the back of the neck, if I want, I can go all the way open and I can clean everything and just to give it a nice little natural look. And I'll go in with my trimmer and backhand. I'm not going to be putting any type of sharp lines in. This way, this keeps it still just a nice natural flow. So whether his hair is down this or pushing it back up, you still have a nice little blend. You could also go in and do a little bit of trimmer over comb as well if you really needed to. Now to come in on the beard on this side, keep everything as wide as possible. Very simple. Put a nice little clean low line like that. Now, when it comes to the beard, of course, his comes down more at a little bit of an angle, and typically you always see more guys have a little bit of like a light patch right here, which is completely fine. We're gonna follow his natural line. You just tap down and then slide. And you get to the curve, instead of having to keep coming down like this, we tap and we just slide. We use that corner. I'm actually placing my pinky up against the side of his cheek here and then just pivoting and really just now I'm using my trimmer like it's a pencil. You see how that's starting to come out there? You can actually see where those hairs that we left and they come right in. It doesn't have to be this perfect swoop. It doesn't have to be this um photoshopped or like how in a lot of the Instagram videos and everything look. It doesn't have to be that. It just has to work for your client, for your customer, for your model, for your friend, for your father, your son, anybody, for yourself too. If you are doing your own beard and things like that. So the biggest thing too is you would rather create less of a regrowth, less work for your customer to be able to do at home, where they feel like that they're not able to follow along with your line. So you want to be able to make it as easy for them as possible. And even the edge that's right here on the side, it's just a light little tap. That's it. Right there along the vertical bar or bumper, every which way, there's all these different little terms that we like to be able to use in the barbershop for that. So even here, like I can still see is great because the phone's actually acting like a little bit of a mirror for myself as well too. So I can see these little areas where there might be these little darker little spots. So if I want, I can go in and corner blend a little bit and get out the little easier transition here. Okay. Now, next step would end up being the mustache. Okay. I like taking a number one because it's flat. You go down with the grain. Remember, if you're going down with the grain, it's actually going to be half of whatever it is against. So a number one will be the same thing as me using a number two against. Now look at this though. If I use a number two against, before I even get here, halfway up, what am I doing? I'm stabbing his nose. So instead, if I use a number one and I go down with the grain, I'm basically just taking off layers. And I don't even have to have him tuck his nose or anything. I come straight down and hit all those little hairs off his mustache. Gives me the same shade, same work. Now it lightened up a lot. Now he doesn't have all these little hairs that are flipping up. I'm not going to be touching him, tapping him in the nose. And I can easily come in. You find that little peak, that little V that's right there in the mustache. You form another V. Use the corners and make that. So now I can actually see where the hairs separate. I'm come around to the other side. Very light again, just use the corners. You want to make sure that you don't end up flipping like his lip or the corner of his mouth or anything else like that.
So Gino, if you zero gap your trimmer, do you have to be concerned working around the face?
Um, you you can be concerned, but honestly, if you're using a zero gap trimmer, you have been using it like that for a long time. So it's all your pressure, so I'm really not putting barely any pressure. So I can come in, this is zero gap, and I come in like this on his face, and I can come up this way, and I'm barely tapping I'm letting the trimmer do all the work. So that's the thing. The same thing with the full shaver. You don't want to take the full shaver and press because even though the cutters are on springs, what you're doing is causing that friction in between the actual cutters and the foil on the inside. So if you keep pressing, it's moving back and forth at 10,000 RPMs, it's going to end up filing out the inside of the metal on there, and it's going to end up eventually causing that foil to cut up and outwards, and then it's going to end up cutting your client. So that's the same. It's the same aspect with that. So no, you really don't have to be concerned with it. It's all again, it's just your angle. I'll actually show you an example. Let me get this other trimmer that I have out of my drawer here. Oh, there we go. Almost had death by tripod. So, so here you go. We have our we have another old trimmer called the FX3, and I put our gold blade on instead of a black blade. You see how much wider that angle is compared to this one? Let me match it. You see how this one is how it sticks up so much farther? This is a 34-degree blade angle, and this is a 30-degree. So in order to get that flat cut, I have to hold my trimmer here. In order to get that flat cut here, look how much more I have to tilt this one up compared to this one. Okay. So in order to use this one, I can't come in and edge like this. I have to actually tilt it upwards. So I'm actually getting that downward motion because if not, my clients are just going to be feeling the bracket here on the inside and those two springs, and they're not even being cut by the blade. They'll be getting cut by that bracket. Okay. So when I'm trimming here, I have to tilt this up. When on this one, you can see how I have to come up like this. So with this one, I can be down and have the exact same. So this is a little more comfortable to hold in your hand. So that's the only thing where you have to be really concerned with is just the angle of the blade and how you're actually using it. So let me go ahead and flip him around
I
here.
just have to tell you that I just got another text or chat from Emily, and she just says, I have been doing hair for years and years, and I am learning so much today. Thank you.
Oh, that's awesome to hear. I appreciate that. So now we're all going to do now the biggest thing, the hardest part is now just completing the same step again on the other side. You guys can, is this angle okay with him? Is that fine or okay? Let's make sure here. Okay. So with this side, I'm probably going to be walking around both sides. I might step in front of the camera just so y'all know. So I'm gonna be doing a little bit more moving around with this side just because of being right-handed and I have a massive deal on cut with my left. So I'm gonna do the same step again, all the way back in with the trimmer. It really doesn't matter which tool that you use. You don't even have to do this with the zero gap tool or anything else like that. So whatever is more comfortable. And back in with my true hair. And John's used to it because he's already over here turning his head for me because he already knows the area that I need to get into with the lighting. And then it's back to be my 1.5. Okay, now I'm gonna skip a step here for a second. Remember before we went through the whole fade and then we did the clipper over comb. We can just go right into clipper over comb right now. We don't even have to wait to do all the fade. You can jump right in, do your clipper over comb, take care of all the little areas that are necessary now. So that way when you get to it later on, it's less that you have to worry. And the other thing is too, could this look better? Sure, of course it could, but it's not necessary. Right now, at least not right now. We need to go ahead and be able to chase out the line. All I did right now was just clear out some of the bulk, debulked a little bit, and cleared out the canvas. So this way, and makes it a little easier. So as I'm doing my transition, I don't have this hair that's overhanging. I just got that out of the way and got it out of my eyesight. So now we can fine tune everything else from that point on. Remember, going back in with the shavers. This is a double foil shaver, and I'm using it with just the top foil. So any of our shavers we have, it doesn't matter if it's a box one like this, if it's a metal one, if it's our new stick shavers or anything else that we have, like the new ones that we have for like the FX for the new FX1 series. It doesn't matter what it is like that. Look for the logo, okay? Because that's where the top foil is actually going to be. That's what's actually going to be facing me. This way I can use the top foil like as if it's a one foil. There's the thing. I can see everything that I need to shave here. But watch this line right here. There we go. Watch this line here. As soon as I flip this over, what happens from here? Now I can't see it. I could end up taking my shaver foil up too high above and cut higher area than I want, especially here on the side. Like when I get up near his beard, if I were to put this over, I'm taking a chance of cutting into his beard hair. And then what it's going to end up doing on the beard hair is it's going to end up probably possibly pulling that hair. It's not going to cut, it's just going to pull. And all it's going to do is be painful to your customers. Okay? So we go through our same cutting systems for the efficiency and things like that. So I understand like for y'all, outlining, you're going back, front, and sides. Interior, you're doing top, back, and sides, and still doing your cross checking, still doing your texturizing, your finger blow drying, and then doing everything within that 12 to 16 minutes. Since you can see in the back here in the shop, everybody has a ring light, okay, up on their stations. So I have my ring light right now, it's right behind my phone that we're filming on. So this way I'll do each side. After I do my sections, I cut each side at a time. And then if I would be cutting the back, then I would be turning him to the back and actually then fixing the back of the hair at the time. So this way, all the lighting is focusing directly right on that one side that I need him to be. And this actually helps us to be able to cut down on a lot of our time as well. We already did the shave. We'll go back in with that same tool like we did before. The reason why like it normally would not matter which trimmer that you're using to take out the line. But again, like I said, a little bit of a rule. If you put it in with this one, with this particular one, take out the line with this one. If you put the line in with the gold, take it out with the gold. It just makes it easier because it's already set that way. So you don't have to worry about any skin irritation or anything else. If there wasn't any irritation from when you put the line in, there won't be anything when you try to take the line out. Now you just start fading away. Closed, all the way closed. Again, this is going to be locked into your zero position because that's your next step up on the trimmer. And it kind of seems like I'm doing like a little bit of like a round motion. I am. And I'm just using the corner. I'm kind of doing a little bit of a round motion. I'm also doing a softening effect at the same time. Now I go back down to the midpoint. So one, or as I call it, 1, 3, 5. First notch, third notch, fifth notch. And I go down to the fifth notch, all the way open through half, because again, no attachments. If you're wondering why I keep calling it a true half, is because when I started all those years ago, talking 2002, 2003, there was no half guards. If someone said they wanted a half, this was your half. If there was no 1.5 guards, so if you wanted a 1.5, you put your number one attachment and opened it up. So this would be your one. This would be your 1.5. We didn't have that luxury of having a 1.5. So we had to create our own 1.5. We had to create and use our own half. So by with that being said, it just helps us out now. We'll be able to take our fade even further and save us a lot more time. And I'll go back to using a number one. So I'll go back and use the half guard afterwards, just again for blending if it's necessary. Sometimes it's not even necessary, but if you need to, you have it there. And that's the reason why the company include them with everything. There's the one, back in my half, my mid position, and then all the way open. And if you use detachable blades at all, this would be your 1A. And 1.5. If you also used to use detachables at all, that's the reason why whenever they used to come with a 000 blade, That's the reason why that blade was the only blade that the plastic attachments was actually able to sit on. Okay, that was actually your true half. There's the only difference between that clipper and this clipper is that now we have a taper lever that's going to allow you to be able to go from 0 to a half with 3 different levels in between. So that taper lever is going to allow you to be able to get your shortest cut without having to swap blades. Now you can just use 8 different guards with 5 different length settings that giving you 40 different length settings to be able to work on your clients. So now so now we're back onto the half guard. You're going to see something a little bit different with his hair. This side, it looks a little bit more square, like where seems like you have a lot more surface, because this is where his natural part is at. Okay, so this part is going to stand out. There's going to be a little bit more of a shelf look on this side, and the other side, it's just going to kind of flow a little bit differently. His hair also flows differently on this side than on the other side. So that's perfectly fine as well. And those are the things that you are already learned how to use for each of your customers.
So I have another question for you.
Great.
We have Brandy and Emily out here, and they're both asking about the fade blade because theirs came with a taper blade. So they're wanting to know, would it be more efficient for them to have the fade blade?
Fade blade is all going to be again personal preference. I definitely believe you should try it, but it's not something that is really truly necessary. So, like on the gold one, this is comes with a taper blade, but I have this pretty close in terms of my adjustment. I can't really see too much, but you can see the tips of the gold still. It's not exactly zero gapped, but it's fairly close. Okay. So I'm trying to get it to focus there. So yeah, it's not exactly totally zero gapped, but it is pretty close. So it's not something that is really necessary. The fade blade is obviously is going to be like one large trimmer blade. It is going to help you get a little bit tighter, but you can still do the tight fades with the taper blade, and that's perfectly fine. There are other blades though. You can swap out any of the other blades that we have. So we even have this blade that comes with our LoProFX1, which I did have with me when we were in Minnesota. This is called our MIM blade. So this is fairly like a newer fade blade, but I call it a little bit more of a hybrid. So it's not exactly as flat as a fade blade, but you still have a little bit of a roundness like a taper blade actually does. Okay. So we have like other blades that I have here in my drawer, but I can't exactly reach it right now from where my tripod is. But we have another blade. It's called our wedge blade. Wedge blade's a little bit flatter. That's also a hybrid blade, but it's a little bit more square on this end right here. So, but this blade would be kind of like a hybrid blade as well, a little bit more of a fade. Like I would say 60% fade, 40% taper of a functionality. But no, to answer their questions, it's not necessary. If you want to try it, it's worth it. It's worth the try. But again, you're talking 45, $50 to take a chance when it's honestly, if you've been doing fine with the taper blade, it's not broken, don't fix it. You'll be completely fine. Before fade blades came out, all we used was taper blades. We were able to work just fine with them. It's just now with more options, it's the grass isn't always greener. So if that makes sense. So it may not work better for you and your clientele. If your clientele does a lot more tighter and closer fades and things like that, then fine. But your taper blade is going to be able to allow you to still get through bulk. It's still going to be able to allow you to get shorter haircut. And it's also still going to be able to allow you to get that nice softening effect in terms of blending out and tapering and great for clipper over comb. And just finishing up here, some of the clipper over comb that's available. I'm gonna jump to my 2 guard, which honestly, a lot of times this is the highest I ever go when I'm using attachments. I usually don't go too much higher than a 2 unless the haircut actually calls for it. Other than that, when in terms of blending, I go up to a 2, and everything else I do is flip over comb where I use my shears. Any other questions so far?
Not at this time.
Sounds good. So I know we're getting we're getting close on our time. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do his beard on this one here. And we got about another 10 more minutes, I know. So back to that half cord like we did before. Okay. A lot of times I go right down to being at almost zero. But for this case, I'm going to just use the half cord like we did before. Blend it up against the grain, flip back over, go reverse V-scoop with the grain. Soften up that hair at that point. Now you can go in and just kind of fade out little areas here. You see how I'm placing my hand up against here and I'm not having to do all this crazy motion? You just place in here and I'm just taking and I'm really just using a couple of fingers and my thumb and just working my way through it. Now, if you want something in terms, we were talking about the maintenance earlier. So a lot of times, I don't know if anybody noticed when I was cutting when I was doing those few haircuts at the booth the last time. Because like I said, I use my air hose a lot. We use our disinfectant. So if you're so I recommend if you're not using the Babyliss all-in-one disinfectant, of course, use Clipper Side, the orange and white can. Those are great tools. My wife did nails for a long time. My opinion on it is it's good enough to use for nail tools, for cuticle nippers and things like that. And be able to disinfect the tools is great for our clippers as well. So it's a wonderful product that's been out for decades. So the other thing when it comes down to with kind of maintenance and working along with your tools is the heat indicator. Okay. I'm so used to choking up on the clipper. If anybody played baseball or softball, they'll understand what I'm talking about. It gives you more control. So you can't really cut hair with your hand all the way down here and be able to work. So you have to move your hand up further. And I'm just trained to keep my finger over the top of the blade because when the 1.5 guards first came out, the plastic was so thin it would always pop off the blade too easily. So I would always hold this here to make sure it wouldn't pop off. But what it also does is think about this: if you touch anything hot inside of your hand, your fingers are going to tell you touch a curling rod, touch a pan that you're cooking with or anything else like that. It's going to be able to tell you if this blade gets hot, my finger is going to be able to tell me before anything else. What I can also do is I can tap the inside of my arm, or I can tap the top of my hand. The reason for that is that if you feel the top of your top, like inside of your forearm, basically, as I say, the skin to muscle ratio or skin to tendon that you have there is just like here on the back of the neck. If you feel the inside of your hand right now, as we're watching this, feel the inside here and feel the back of your neck, it's about the same. Okay. And the top of your hand would be just like top part of the guy's mustache go around over the top of the ear. The skin's a lot thinner. It's much closer to bone. So not only to be able to feel how sharp your tools are, or or if there's any heat that's coming off the blade, you'll be able to feel it before your client does, before your customer does, or anybody that you're cutting, especially little kids. You might be cutting your son, and they don't know that that the blade's going to get hot, and that's the shock to them, and they jump. And then you don't want them to be fidgeting or constantly waiting for that to possibly happen. So just simple, just take your disinfectant, flip it upside down, give it a quick one little shot. Take your air hose or take your blow dryer, blow that off real fast. Boom, nice and dry. Now it's cool. Now you can keep going and you can work all the way through with your clients. So that is something that really, really helps out a lot because these blades might get hot. The silver stainless steel blades that we have on some of the clippers, so the silver looking ones, silver top, silver cutting blade, those get hot a little bit faster. The gold ones, it's a titanium that's plated gold with a DLC cutter, diamond like carbon. Two different materials, less heat is going to be coming off of it. We also
Hey,
have a
Gino, we've
yes.
got another question from Luis Rodriguez.
Okay.
When do we use the guards 5, 6, 7, and 8? He says, I only use my lower guards.
I technically only use my lower guards as well too. Lewis, the thing about it is I just use the longer guards when the haircut calls for it. Because you have the clients that might say they know the guard numbers. There's a lot of clients that know the guard numbers because they've been going to a barbershop or going to that particular shop or going to particular great clips for years. And they might have actually say, hey, use a number 8 because they know an 8's an inch. And it's going to leave them with it's going to leave them with an inch long, or they say a 5, or they say a 6. Especially if they're old military, they know the numbers of the cuts because they are sometimes out. As I say, out in the sandbox. They're out in the middle of the desert somewhere, and they only have certain things, and they're getting someone from back home to mail them out a set of clippers with some guards, and they can't really use shears because where they're at. So they come because they can't send them. So send them clippers with the guards, and they already know what guard they use. Or if they have a beard, they know, especially if the beard's longer, they know what guard that they actually use. My beard, I use a 6. If I'm trimming it down, I use a 6. So I cut it down to about 3/4 of an inch. It takes a good amount of those dead ends and everything else off, and then I'll let it grow back out to around this point, you know. So, but this is going to be my winter beard, so I'm going to be letting it grow out a lot longer now until it stops being cool. But that's when you want to go up and use them. But I'm the same way. Typically only use from a half through 2, maybe a number 4 guard because it gives half an inch of hair. I barely even use my 3. Okay, but that's really just me. So Lewis, I'm just like you. I'm just like you there at the same time. But you still want to have them because the moment you don't have it is the moment you need it. So it's just good to still have, even though you may not use it. Then I'll tell you about the blades. The black blade that's on the top is a graphite blade. Graphite stays cool the entire time. So this way you never have to worry about the blade getting hot. But you still spray it. You still are spraying it with the coolant. You're still going to spray that on a regular basis because remember, that spray is not just a coolant, it's a disinfectant. It's a lubricant. It's also a rust preventative. And it's doing everything for you. So you should be disinfecting the tool before, during, and after every cut. So you don't have to over oil the clipper because there's already enough of a lubricant. There's already enough of an oil-based agent already in it. So at every shot, it's measured out and it's actually working its way all the way in. With our with the FX1 low pro that I had there with the MIM blade, you can't, obviously, I wish I had a blade. Actually, you know what? I actually do have a blade here. I have a whole set right here that I call this my little graveyard. And it's all these extra little blades, that I haven't used in a very long time. And actually, here you go. This was an example of that wedge blade I was talking about earlier. You see how flat that blade is? That's a little bit more like a fade blade. It's a little bit more hybrid than the other. So if you see the two blades that are side by side, you see how one narrows out a little bit more, but this is more round here. So it's giving you more of that taper blade here with a fade blade here. And this is a little bit different. So this is the MIM blade. You see those little lines that are up in the cutting part up here and down here? These 3 and these little pockets here, those are called oil reservoirs. So when you do oil your clipper, you're spraying, it's actually as the blade is moving, it's sliding into these grooves and it's staying in there. So that way, what it's doing is now it's giving you that even cut every single time as your blade is moving. Something new to be created now into the inline blade. So this our black graphite version. We also have it in gold, and we have it in that blue that you guys saw on the local at the event.
So Gina, this was such an informative live. I'm telling you, the questions were just incredible. And I'm just gonna give you a couple more minutes to leave us with your parting thoughts.
You know what? Take absolutely one day at a time because everybody tries to rush and jump too far ahead of the game. So I would just say use everything as like a power of one. You have to put one pant leg at a time. Only one person can walk through a door at a time. Take one day at a time. People live paycheck to paycheck, 1 week at a time. Things like that. So just take your time, get yourself going. Each client, every time you cut that customer, you're going to be able to learn their head and their hair type and learn the personalities behind them. And you'll be able to put that in your clip notes as well. So I would just say, take your time. Don't rush. Do it at your own pace. Of course, within the 12 to 16 minutes, but then work your way from there. And then it'll be a wonderful time. If y'all ever have any questions, please feel free. Send me a message at Gino the Barber 813. If you ever have any issue with your tool, make sure though that you do when you send me a picture or video of the tool, do it where it says it stays in the chat. So that way, if it's an issue I can't figure out, I can send it up to our engineer up at the corporate office in Connecticut and they can figure it out from there. But if you ever have any questions or anything about haircuts or anything, please feel free to send me a message. I always try to respond to everybody. But I appreciate y'all having me on today. This was wonderful. Time went by a lot faster than I even expected as well.